you joined House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in a press conference regarding the border crisis. And at the presser, you said that, you want Biden and the U.S. Congress to fund the government and secure the nation's border. I know you went to Eagle Pass and you met a migrant woman, who had been assaulted, kidnapped, and taken by her or taken from her husband by the cartel. First off, I know securing the border is a big deal, but when you have such drastic things like that going on, where do you even start?
Well, enough is enough. And where President Biden should have started was in January of 21, not reversing the Trump policies that actually worked. Remain in Mexico, the wall, funding our Border Patrol agents, giving them the technology. But unfortunately, he had almost 300 executive actions on day one to reverse the ability for Border Patrol and customs agents and other law enforcement agents from doing their job. And so here we are with record numbers of illegal immigrants, hundreds of people who match the terror watch list, thousands of criminals who've entered our country that are wreaking havoc and chaos. Enough is enough. And my stance at this point in time is we're trying to do everything we can to fund the government to keep it open. We're making cuts on spending, which is extremely important. I think we've made some really good headway. But my position has been this: without border security on any sort of continuing resolution, we're not going to do anything for the Biden administration. They're going to have to make a choice on whether or not they want border security, and make a choice to keep the government funded. That's going to be their choice.
And I know you mentioned about keeping the government open, and you said if Biden wants to keep the government open, he needs to shut down the border. And Texans have had enough, like you mentioned. How did those two things correlate? How does the keeping the government open and the shutting down of the border correlate in your eyes?
Well, right now we're going through discussions to make sure that we can pass appropriations bills and to do the things that will keep the government open. It's likely that we'll come to a point here in the next 2 or 3 days where we have to have some sort of stopgap spending measure. And in that measure, we will send or attempt to send the Senate and the White House HR2, which is the border security legislation that we passed earlier this year, the strongest and the most conservative border security legislation in decades. And we're asking all Republicans to vote on it. We're asking everybody to come together to unify and to send that to the Senate, to put the Democrat leaders, Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden, on notice, to know that Texans have had enough. We had the debate last night. I've been leading in this area. We'll continue to highlight just how egregious it is. But that's our game plan. That's what we intend to do. And I'm really hopeful that we can get this done as Republicans. If we come together, we have a strong hand. And I think it's time we stand up for Texas. That's exactly why I think I'm up here. That's the message I've been delivering to my colleagues who are from all over the country, from New York to California and Washington. Everybody is now understanding the severity of this problem and that it's unacceptable.
Yeah, and you mentioned the debate last night, and the border was a topic. It was one of the first topics that they got into. And you mentioned how you've been wanting your Republican colleagues to vote on what you have going on here with your ideas and everything like that. One thing that you mentioned was the wall. I know that you aimed to increase the number of Border Patrol agents at the border, and also you helped write a bill aimed to restart the border wall construction. Now, one of your colleagues at the debate last night, Vivek Ramaswamy, he says he believes that the wall isn't the most efficient way. But for you, I know that's something that you very much so believe is efficient enough to take care of, the issues that we have at the border. Tell me why that is.
Well, I can't speak for the presidential candidates, but on the House floor in Washington, D.C., as we're debating our own internal processes and amendments and funding measures, it is important to have a physical barrier. We wouldn't be in this situation if President Biden hadn't canceled the funding for the wall. We wouldn't be in this situation if President Biden hadn't canceled the Remain in Mexico policy. We wouldn't be in this position if President Biden hadn't stopped deportations. I've been to the border towns many, many times, and every single time I go, every Border Patrol agent, no matter if they're day one on the job or if they've been there for 30 years, they all say the same thing: without consequences, you will continue to see a massive surge in illegal immigration. And I listen to them. I believe what they're saying. They are the experts. And so for the purposes of what we're doing in Washington, D.C., I am educating my colleagues on the fact that we need to fund the wall, that we need to fund our Border Patrol agents, that we need to stop the massive amounts of immigration by having deportation flights. This is the lack of political will that President Biden has brought to our country, and it is bringing us down. It's unacceptable, and this is why we're taking action. And I'm calling on all of my Republican colleagues in Congress to join me in voting for this spending gap measure that will continue to fund the government while we pass appropriations bills. But it will put, importantly, border security legislation on the White House and make sure that they know that it's up to them. And we're asking them to shut down the massive amount of immigration that's coming through our country, to shut down the border, but to keep the government open.
Back on, how you voted to vote to pass House Bill 2. I mentioned how you aim to restart the border wall construction, increase the number of Border Patrol agents, strengthen laws to protect unaccompanied minors and traffickers, and end, the catch and release policy. I asked at the beginning, I said, where do we start? How do you start? Is that a start for you, or is that kind of the culmination of everything?
No, we have HR 2, which was the border security legislation, included many of those measures that you just mentioned. It not only restarts the border wall construction, it not only helps our Border Patrol agents with the resources they need, the hiring of more agents, but it sends a strong signal to the White House to say, we're not okay with you canceling Remain in Mexico or canceling deportation flights. That is the thing. The catch and release policy has to end. It has to stop. So when we put HR 2 on the president's desk, sure, he may not agree to all of it, but if he wants to keep the government open, then he needs to take it seriously and take the most important measures, which are, we need to turn people away at the southern border, and that has not been happening.
There was a grandmother and a granddaughter from Ozona who were killed in a high-speed chase with a human trafficker smuggling 11 undocumented migrants. Just your thoughts and I mean, where do you even start?
I brought that family up to Washington, D.C. They participated in a hearing on Homeland Security Committee that I was in. The Tambunga family has suffered more tragedy than many Americans will ever know. And it was at the hands of Joe Biden, because he allowed these people to come into the country. He's allowing coyotes and traffickers to do these criminal activities, to continue to traffic people. In that case, 11 people, 105 miles per hour. And it tragically, instantly ended the lives of a 71-year-old grandmother and her 7-year-old granddaughter. This is completely avoidable. It's preventable. And President Biden has to do something to reverse course, because that's the exact tragedy that we cannot have anymore. That's why I'm standing up at this time and leading in Congress to make sure that this issue is front and center and that we do something about it.
Tell me about the relation of the fentanyl crisis and our border crisis.
Well, that's exactly right. This is why ending the massive surge of illegal immigration into our country is so important, because 100,000 people last year died as a result of fentanyl poisoning, many in the district that I represent. It's unacceptable. Joe Biden has allowed this chaos to happen. We have to shut down the border. We have to focus on catching the criminals who are bringing fentanyl in. We have to stop the cartels who own the southern border, who have operational control of it. Secretary Mayorkas has failed us. President Biden has abandoned Texans, and fentanyl is poisoning our youth, and it's unacceptable.
And then my last one for you. You mentioned the most recent surge. Tell me if you have any numbers on how many encounters Border Patrol has had, with this most recent surge.
Just in the last couple of days, we're averaging 10 to 11,000 people a day that are coming illegally into this country. When I was in Eagle Pass, it was, just a constant stream of thousands of people coming in. And, the Border Patrol agents are basically rendered powerless because Mayorkas and Biden won't let them turn people away. This is political will. It's a lack of political will. We had over 230,000 people come into the country in August alone, which has put us at now what is the most people on record in a one-year period ever in the history of the country. Over 2.3 million people, and we expect that to grow to almost 2.5 million people. Last year, it was 2.2. The year before, it was 2 million. These numbers have never been matched. In the last year of President Trump's presidency, it wasn't even 500,000 people. And now that's increased by almost 500%. So This is political will. I saw it firsthand. It's tragic. Eagle Pass, Del Rio, the Rio Grande Valley, El Paso, all of the places in Texas are suffering. And you know what? We have Democrat members, House of Representatives members, Democrats from Texas, who want to defund Operation Lone Star, defund the state of Texas for doing the protective measures and the security that President Biden should be doing. Unacceptable. I debated that on the House floor last night. I pushed back on them, and we killed that amendment because it's just unconstitutional. Thank you for having me on today.